Alright, hello and welcome back to Redemptive Wood. This is shop project number 2, and I'm adding some French cleats to my tool wall that I recently added plywood to, and so I opted the Frank Howarth way with the French cleats, where you leave your table saw at 90 degrees and cut 5-inch strips of plywood, and then after that you tilt your table saw blade to 45 degrees and cut them in half. Now I say half, but you actually normally it would be 2.5 inches, is half of 5, but you subtract half the width of the plywood. So in my case, I'm using 3/4 inch plywood for my French cleats, so half of 3/4 of an inch is 3/8. So I subtract that from 2 4/8, or 2.5, and I get 2 1/8 of an inch. So after you tilt your blade to 45 degrees, I cut it ripped each one to with a 45-degree angle to 2 1/8 of an inch, and then that gives you 2 separate French cleats with only having to tilt your blade once after cutting all those 5-inch strips. So I'm adding the French cleats. Start at the bottom on the left side of my tool cubby wall, which you can see the tool cubby video, which is my shop project number 1. And then being a little bit attention deficit, I had to switch and create a tool holder for my levels, because I was getting a little bit bored of adding all the French cleats. So very simple, just used a Forstner bit to cut in a little bit of a gap that allows my thumb to get in there and pull out that level. I really enjoy that level. It works well, and it seems to be very accurate. So I like it. And there it is. Just added some French cleat on the back, and I usually don't glue, but for some reason I decided to glue the French cleat on the back of this one. Usually I just do some screws on it, but it worked out, because oftentimes I'll create something and I won't like it in a little bit, so we'll see how long this one lasts. That's why I don't glue it, but so far so good. Just simple, use some scrap wood there, and it's up. So I had this hardware shelf that I used, and I had the each shelf tilted for these boxes, the yellow boxes, containers, and now I bought these Acromill boxes that have a little dip in the front, so it allowed me to straighten the shelving and get me a few more shelves in there on the same piece. So I just removed the shelving and made it level, and then was able to add in a couple more rows, and I gave it a lip on the front, and I added this piece on the back, but I don't think I needed it. But again, it allowed me to add in a few more shelves than what I had prior to, and I had to go with had to go with yellow and green to support my Oregon ducks. And so then I used some bandy clamps to add that little plywood lip so the Acromill bins don't fall. So then I went back to French cleat wall, and what you see on the right there by those magnetic strips is what I had on that wall before the plywood. So after I'm done with this French cleat wall, I will then go to that side and start removing all that shiplap, which is very annoying to have there. It just catches dust and doesn't look that nice and darkens it up. So I want to lighten up my space as much as possible, and I already did that with some LED lighting, and so that'll be the next project after I get this back tool wall complete. I used 3-inch spacers between my French cleats. That gives me enough room to put in my pieces that adjoin when I hold up other shelving. And here's a little piece for my brad nailer, my pin nailer. So I glued that one as well. So again, I don't know why I glued it, but I did. Maybe just on a roll with the glue. And I had this mallet, which I got in a series of tools that I sold a potting bench to the old owner of the house, this basement house that my wife and I live in, and I sold it to him for half the cost, and he gave me some tools because he's not doing woodworking anymore. So I got that mallet from him as part of the deal. not for $50, but because that was half the price of my potting bench, but that and some files and some clamps as well. So I'd say it was a pretty good deal. So just a very simple piece, and now I'm working on, took another stab at a sanding disc shelf, and every time I do dados, I make the mistake of I'm marking off my 5-inch or 6-inch pieces, and I'm going to rip it and then cut the dados, which does not make sense at all because your dados are going to be off. So if I would have just kept the plywood sheet in without ripping it into 3 pieces or 2 pieces, then I wouldn't have to do this twice. So I did this dado cuts twice, and all those moving of that 2 inches, 2 1/8 of an inch over, I did that twice. So if you're going to do dados, don't cut it first. Cut it after you make the dado cuts. So please learn from me. One of my many mistakes. And then here I am sanding the little dividers, and it would make the glue up a lot easier. And as you'll see here, I have to hammer a lot in because they're just not perfectly aligned. They'd be perfectly aligned if I would have just cut the dados before ripping the pieces each side. So, mistake. I'll probably do dados, and I probably won't do dados for a long time, that I'll forget about it as well. And you can see that I use way too many clamps, or I use enough clamps, but I could have used a lot less if I, again, would have cut the dados before ripping the plywood sheets. So lots of clamps to fix my mistakes. But it worked, adding the top there, and I think that about does it. I routed over the edges just for a little bit of a cleaner look, and I could probably spend all day just organizing those. I spared you on this. I just added a Forstner bit piece, and I kind of messed up there. You can see that some don't fit all the way through, and some countersink bits, and I added a clamp rack, which I already had on a different wall. I basically just cut it down, and then a staple one as well. Feel free to subscribe if you liked what you saw. Give it a thumbs up, and other than that, we'll see you on the next one. Take care.